Thank you very much for joining us, and good morning. Really appreciate the lead-in, Catherine and JD Powers. I guess we're going to get some kind of a JD Powers survey on our panel, so we'll try to do the best we can for satisfaction. In fact, if anybody gets a survey, send it to me. I'll fill it out for you, and we'll make sure that it's taken care of. We really appreciate the audience joining us for our second day. It's as Catherine said, it's packed with a lot of new information, and we hope we'll give you clues going after this meeting, going back to work, of how you can do your job a little better, do better planning, think about the future, make some assumptions about the future, because that's what this is about, making sure that we can assure the right future for all of us. Our panel today is a tremendous group of folks. We're very appreciative that they've taken time out of their busy schedule to share some of their thoughts. And believe me, their thoughts are like gold. It's worth every second that you hear what they say. We have the topic of our panel is, for part of reciprocity, is what we want for our customers. What do we all want? This is the dealer's perspective. This is the world of where the rubber meets the road, as Catherine said. This is the dealer's perspective, what we want for our customers. And then second, what we want from the OEMs to allow us to deliver to the customers what needs for success. And we've got to go through this topic in a way that allows us to make some assumptions as well. Joining us, of course, Alicia Van Bokel has been with us. She's the performance manager for Maritz Automotive, and spends her time training and developing associates in the dealerships on commercial vehicles. She knows as much about where we are, what the state is, and how we're developing as a group as anybody. And she knows this business really, really well. Rene Hilaire is with us, and he has experience both at the factory and at the dealer level. So he sees both sides of the coin. He's the director of fleet and commercial for the Hendrick Automotive Group, a large organization with a number of stores that are involved in commercial throughout the region, and has given us a lot of help and guidance in developing our programs at Work Truck Solutions, as has Dan. Dan Bryan, general manager of Ricart to Business in Columbus, a leading innovative organization driven by Dan that's showing the way for what commercial operations should be and can be in every market, and the way it ought to run. So we appreciate your taking the time, and we also encourage you to ask any questions of these experts. I've got some questions. We're going to have a nice chat, but on the other hand, questions from the audience may be more appropriate, and also that's what we're here for, is for you to understand and learn. Okay, so we'd like to get started, and first of all, since we're talking about what we want for our customers, I'd like to start with a topic, and that is, since we've come out of the COVID period, the post-COVID current environment, now that we're sort of in this next phase of what normal is going to be, have you seen any changes amongst your customers, things that they're prioritizing, what they're looking for? Is anything changed from what was before we went into COVID? And how do you see any trends in customer behavior emerging? So maybe Dan, you could start with that and share some of your observations that you've got.
First off, thanks for having me on. Probably the best example of something that I've seen coming out of COVID, and especially along with the theme of the reciprocity of this summit, was we had two customers. One is a final mile delivery, Amazon, FedEx, DSP, ISP, and another that actually does sprinkler systems. And somehow they got connected. And rather than buying more vehicles, they're actually working together and sharing vehicles throughout the busy season, throughout the holidays. I think couldn't think of a better example of those guys working together, sharing employees and sharing vehicles.
But that is the future, and that's sharing the assets and managing their fleets responsibly. Rene, how about from your perspective? What kind of changes have you seen, trends?
I think one of the things that we are encountering, and this happened as a result of COVID, like everything else, right? From baseball fans out there, everybody's trying to shorten up the process, the game. People don't want to commit a long period of time to do anything. And what we found out through COVID was how to do F&I, really on a shorter process. We most of our transactions during COVID, or I guess all of them, were done by phone, and so we had to streamline that process. So we're looking at those best practices and saying, okay, if we could do it in 45 minutes or less on the phone, why are we keeping people in the box for an hour and a half, 2 hours? So whatever the time is. So we're looking at trying to take the best practices from COVID, how we did things either through video call or phone, and trying to see if we can put those into the actual process itself to shorten that up, because I think customers learned through COVID that you can do things at a quicker pace, and I think now they're starting to expect that.
Well, it's becoming more efficient, and you can do more business maybe with fewer associates, and it's better for the customer.
Yeah.
And that makes sense from a standpoint of operations. Maybe Alicia, based on that, and also trends you've seen, but are the folks you're seeing in the training ready to accept and adapt to technology and use it in a way that Rene said that they need to?
Yeah, and that's the toughest part. I mean, if COVID taught us anything, it's that we don't have to go anywhere to get what we want and get it right now. I mean, think of all the grocery stores and the chains and the Uber My Eats that can deliver me whatever I want without me even having to leave the house, right? It's easeability. I want this to be easy. I want it to be simple. I want it to be convenient. I want this to be hard and a long drawn out process. I want what I want and I want it right now. And that is tough to transition to an area where we were more accustomed to, like, well, yeah, come on in the dealership. Come on in. We'll sit down. We'll chat about this. Of course, we love it when people come to the dealership so we can develop that rapport and develop the relationship. But our customers aren't really giving us that opportunity as much as what they used to, because they're not giving us the time, right? Time is money, time is value. They're not giving us that time. So we need to make sure that we are well trained and using all of our technologies and tools that we have to speed up that rapport process, to speed up that customer relationship, to speed up tell me what it is that you want, tell me what it is that you need, and let me as the professional match you up with your perfect vehicle.
Yeah, that's the difference maybe with commercial, where you're building a relationship and not just a transaction, which is maybe more of a challenge using technology.
Yeah.
And the idea that about the customer's time and money and efficiency, it's really the beginning of this real movement of mobility, where we see the need to start bundling services to go along with commercial vehicles, not just the hardware. I read a study that in 2030, it was a McKinsey study, that they say 60% of the profit you're going to make in 2030 is going to be from bundled services, not from selling hardware. Fleet management, training of drivers, more efficient use of their economy, of their vehicle operation, trading in all of these bundled services. In talking about the shared vehicle that you saw, Dan, in Columbus, do you see anything yet on interest like fleet management or any of these services that or connected services that will apply to commercial in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the offerings, I mean, I feel very fortunate to be working with Ford. They've got some tremendous tools that are ever evolving. And so I would 100% agree with, your case study that you talked about, because I think the great thing about it is it's just more touch points for us to continue to foster a relationship with someone. And so I think it also gives us greater insight to understanding what their business is and how it is that we can help them. I think that, we, as the theme of this panel is, I think there is still some more training, still some more process that, from Ford's standpoint, and I've talked to our reps about this, we have to be, from a consulting standpoint, we have to be better consultants with this technology. I do think that the customers that we've seen that have moved from the various leasing companies to utilizing some of the Ford products, I think there's some significant advantages that we have over some of the leasing companies. But I do think that there still needs to be more training of the normal commercial account manager to understand those tools, to understand it from a consultative process with that customer. So I don't know how much more there is to say about it, but
how about Rene? How about your perspective?
I'll just jump into that as well. But what you're finding out today is the industry is moving so rapidly that fleet managers and for companies is I'm not going to say that position is going to go away, but even fleet managers are leaning in a little bit more, saying, hey, what can the dealerships do for us in terms of all the other services that come with managing a fleet? But for the small business guys, the small fleets that don't want to pay that salary of a fleet manager, we're starting to see more requests for us to handle that A to Z type of business. So, hey, can you, not only through acquisition, but even disposition of that vehicle, everything that comes in between, we're seeing a little bit more demand and a little bit more interest in customers listening to us speak about that. I think Dan knows this too. And one thing, the industry, I think Ford and Stellantis and GM and all of the OEMs that are in the fleet business, for the last 5 years, they've been talking fleet management. But I'd like to chime in on what Dan said, and Alicia, you'll like this as well, because it always comes back to training. There was a lot of training done by the OEMs, but the execution isn't there. People understand the concept of what fleet management is at the dealership level, but you're not seeing the ball. And if I'm General Motors, or if I'm Ford, or if I'm Stellantis, I'm like, yikes, we need more of that, because we talked about this just before the call. For me, one of the greatest advantages to becoming a fleet management type dealership is you can minimize the amount of inventory you have to carry, because to get into the fleet management business, you're going to have to go into the fleet ordering business as well. And more, especially now with interest rates being up and people don't want to carry the heavy floor plans, we need to start making that movement. And I know things are coming around again, and things will ease up. And when interest rates go back down to 2 or 3%, people forget about this again. But from a strategic point of view, we should never lose sight of the fact that we need to take this industry, this fleet industry, and really turn it into a fleet ordering system where we cycle vehicles, and we need to get there as an industry. I think for survival, I think it's very difficult today to carry enough inventory on your dealership lot to meet the needs of somebody who wants to buy 50 at a time. So you got to get them. You got to get into the fleet ordering. That's just all one aspect of fleet management, but I think it's a very important aspect.
I couldn't agree more, and I hope some of the associates from Work Trucks listening, Kevin and his team, can take that as a note of the way we can respond to the future as a provider of dealer service. Because we have data and information that may be useful to allow you to evaluate how many of what you need and when you need them. And with AI, that should become part of our process. And I think that also it allows you not only to use your money more wisely, but it also allows you to be more responsive to the needs of the customers. And then the second thing, part of this is about what we need from OEMs. That suggests, and Rene, you know this as well as anybody, somehow we have to get the OEM into our process from the beginning of planning and what they're building and how to what we're buying, including the financing and including the upfits, to try and make this one process where the customer doesn't see the transition between chimneys, but is satisfied by some kind of a singular communication process that allows us to build the right, and as Catherine says, the right truck at the right time at the right place.
Yeah. I think, Jim, just at that point, and I know we're going back and forth, which is great, and talk about the OEM side now. I think for anyone out there that might work for a financial arm of any OEM, this is the key. This is the only advice I would give anybody that's listening. If you come to my dealerships, we have 100 stores. We have 30 that are in fleet and commercial. If you come to my store and you talk about features and benefits on track lease, I know this is going to sound tough, but don't bother. We know the features and benefits. We want to know how to do it, how to sell it, how to get the customer excited about track lease, how do you write the paper. That's the type of stuff that we need, because I think if you look at the fleet management companies, they do 98% of everything that goes out the door is leased. That's why they're fleet management companies, that they lease everything. I think I read recently, not long ago, that leasing from a dealership standpoint for fleet is like 2 to 3%. Until we get that leasing figured out, until we know how to really sell track and we know how to make it make sense to the customer, we're just spinning our wheels. So that's just one. If the OEMs are out there listening, we need help on, okay, how do you get a customer excited about track lease? Because that's where it starts, right there.
Echo what Rene's saying. When you think about most of these customers, Ford says 40% of their fleets are 25 units or less. And if you've ever met some of those guys, most of them are owner operators, and they pride themselves on being able to write a check. And if we have the ability, or they brag about, being able to write a check and just pay cash for that truck. And so until we figure out how to be able to show them from cash flow and how it makes sense to use their money elsewhere, I totally agree with Rene.
And that also gives you control. The thing that we used to love about leasing is you have it, you lease it, you still own it, and then you sell it again. I mean,
Jim, I started my career on the retail side, and I was an F&I. And I'll tell you an interesting story about that. I went to F&I school. When I first started working at the dealership, they sent me to an F&I school, 2 weeks. Pat Ryan and Associates. I don't know if they're even around anymore. But at least 2 or 3 days of that class was spent on cash conversion.
Yeah.
And it was very, very great training, because it taught us in F&I how to convert the customer coming in and saying, I'm going to write you a check. That same logic, that same concept has to be applied to track lease. How do we convert the guy that Dan just talked about that says, I'm just going to write you a check? There are some valuable reasons why you want to keep your money, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, and let me show you this track lease. That's what we need help with.
Especially in commercial.
Yes, sir.
Alicia, is that something that comes up in our training activities?
Dan said the word earlier. It's a consultative. We want to keep talking about the post-COVID world. In COVID, it was if I'm a salesperson at a dealership during that whole COVID craze, I was an order taker, because that's all I was doing. I want it, here I have it, come get it. It was almost completely transactional, right? You got what I want. I need it right now. I got to get it because I don't know when I'm going to get in another one. COVID panic. In fact, a lot of the stores that I coach right now talk about having to flip customers out of their quote unquote COVID cars that are no doubtingly buried, right, in negative equity. So we were order takers. Now we're trying to go back to being salespeople, but can't stop there. We can't just being a salesperson is not enough. Selling somebody this truck or unit that they need for their business is not enough. It really has to cross the line to being a full service consultant. What can my store do for your business? And let me explain all of these benefits and why we want to do that. Retention. These two guys know it's far easier to keep a customer than it is to constantly go fishing for new ones. And the way we do that is we really train and explain to the customer, like, why me? Why us? Why my store? Why my brand? Why my vehicle? And it's everything that we're talking about here. It's all the connected services on how this is going to make you do your job, run your business more efficient and more effectively.
Mm-hmm. You know, Dan, Rene brings up an interesting point about the OEM folks that are calling on you. This is partially what we need from the OEMs. How do you evaluate the value that's provided by the field support that you get from the OEM? What would you suggest for them, not just in F&I, but total?
I think the big thing is, and we've seen a transition now that we're a pro elite service center, is that we have one service representative that has 13 stores. And my commercial business manager, I believe, has 34 stores. And so when you look at the difference in those two, and I think he does a great job, and I wouldn't trade him for the world. But the service representative that only has 13 stores, the attention, the responsiveness, that they can do, the training, everything that we're talking about is just going to be that much better. So I think when you look at and evaluate the number of stores that these, factory reps have, I don't know how they do it. I mean, to me, if you've got 34 stores, you're a fireman or firewoman at some point.
Rene, what's your perspective from the inside as well as a dealer? How well trained? The part, it sounds like Dan's got some good ones, but how well trained? Back my experience is that a lot of these field folks are trained by the dealers that they're calling on.
Jim, that's amazing you said that. I had that conversation with somebody this very morning. Somebody called me this morning on a phone call who will remain nameless. I know he's out there listening right now because he sent me a text a minute ago, so he knows this is directed at him. But we talked about this morning. It's amazing to me that sometimes the factory rep or any partner that calls on the dealership, if they want to understand a program, they're actually calling the dealership folks first before they're calling, anybody at the OEM level, because the dealerships, through trial and error, are having to fight and struggle through all that, and they figure it out. At the end of the day, and you say, what do we need from the OEM? I couldn't agree more with what Dan just said there. I come from that world. I actually called on dealerships. I called on fleet and commercial dealerships, and I was that guy. I had 32 stores at one point. And I had to literally make a list and say, okay, who are the big hitters? Who are the middle guys? And who are the guys that are just always going to sell their 9 to 10 a month? And I made that list. And initially I focused on the big hitters. And then I realized, the big hitters are always going to be the big hitters. If I was going to move the numbers, I had to move the middle. So I started focusing on the middle group of dealers. But that meant that there were people that weren't seeing me regularly. And it's just a tall order. And I think the problem with that, and I met a guy years ago who's now retired from the industry, and he taught me something very interesting. He and I got into an argument. I was working for GM at the time in the OEM, but you guys aren't serious about fleet and commercial. Oh, yes, we are. Yes, we are. Look at it. It's 26% of the business. And I mean, I was throwing all these numbers at him. He said, let me tell you why I know that. And he said in that argument to me, he made this comment to me. He said, the problem with most OEMs is they are retail companies that also sell fleet and commercial. They're not really fleet and commercial OEMs. It's just something, and his thinking was, until you become a true bona fide OEM that says, this is our focus, this is what our business is part of, what we're going to do on fleet and commercial. Until that happens, things are never going to be where you have 12 stores for a fleet and commercial rep like you do on the retail side. We still see that struggle today. I mean, fleet and commercial is one of those things that when times get lean and retail starts slowing down, they lean on you heavily. But when times are good, they make LTZs. And that's until they figure that out, until they strike that balance. I think it's always going to be something that we have to deal with in this industry.
I could add to
Nailed
that.
it.
Okay.
I feel very fortunate that, we have the relationship with Ford that we do. And I've seen this transition from a training standpoint, like we were talking about track leases is one example, but I've seen the change and take their EV training. And I've seen, we had two people from Ford that came to us and said, we're going to review this curriculum and see how we can be better at this. And after they made the curriculum change, we were fortunate enough to have them come and do the training with us, and it was fantastic. After they were here, those same people that were here that we were helping to look at that curriculum reached back out and said, "What else do you need?" So I see the commitment that at least Ford is doing to try to make a change and help with the training piece. But I think the one piece that's really important is just like those two people coming to the store and understanding the role and learning what it really takes and understanding an invoice and understanding, the most complex piece of the business is the fleet and commercial, whether it's speccing a truck or doing a track lease, like Rene was saying, or handling service problems or whatever it may be. And so I applaud them that they are making that transition to where it was much different than what it used to be a few years ago. But I think they need to double down on that right now.
Alicia, do you have any observations of what kind of training from the OEMs is deficient in the stores that you're mentoring?
Yeah, it really boils down to, so there's your factory programs, and you guys know this. I know that I called on dealers too. I had 25 dealers across 4 different states. You just can't give everybody enough time and enough attention. And in the small amount of attention that you have with your stores, you're really torn between what is it that you need from us, dear dealership, to help you more efficient. And then, oh yeah, we have to talk about all these things that the OEM wants is in requesting, and we have to talk about all these things. In the retail world, that's all your alphabet soup programs, right? So you have to be
Checklist.
We rank and spank, right? Where are you at in the rank and spank? Are you ranked? Are you spanked? So it really is a struggle between time, efficiency, and then what is going to move the needle. And unfortunately, there's not enough time for somebody that's not saying uneducated, but not experienced with what these guys and their sales team has to go through on a day-to-day basis. And then not just from what the OEMs want, but from what we want for our customers. We want this to be simple, easy, and convenient, but the means in which we're trained or lack thereof training to help this be a simple, easy, and convenient experience for our customers is not there. You want to talk about you're either in commercial or you're out. Quite honestly, and I might offend some people here, but as an OEM standpoint, I don't know that I would allow a dealership to have a point person who also runs their retail BDC or internet shop also be I took a test, so now I'm the fleet and commercial manager. That's doing a real disservice to any business that wants to buy fleet and commercial units from that dealership, because no way that person is going to have the bandwidth, the time, the education to really be that consultant for that business owner. Like, we just can't. You're either in or you're out. You can't be one. You just can't. Like, if we're going to be commercial, we need to be commercial. We need to make sure our website says we're commercial. We need to make sure our processes say we're commercial. We need to make sure we are trained to be commercial, not 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
I think it's so true. And it's endemic of the large organizations. I call it big company disease, where the people that have 5% of the information make 90% of the decisions.
Yeah.
And the people,
Jim, to add to what Felicia said, I think part of the problem, and I'd like to also echo what Dan said, we have a great relationship with our OEM partners here, and we have no complaints. the things that I'm talking about are more strategic. But here's something that I learned real quickly after being 30 years at the OEM side, coming back to retail. So kind of funny, right? I started retail, went to OEM, came back to retail. So anyway, the funny thing that the interesting thing that I've learned in the transition back into retail is that one of the things that OEMs struggle with, I won't speak for all of them, but the ones that we deal with very closely, is they talk about fleet and commercial interchangeably. They're two completely different things. Commercial is small business and retail business, really. Fleet is a whole different animal. And when an OEM rep comes into the store and is talking fleet and commercial, and we have to slow down and say, wait a minute, commercial is different than fleet. That's where I say, when if you're gonna double down and going to train your factory reps, that's where, to me, start understanding that there's a difference between the two different types of approaches. Strategies are different, customer interactions are different. They're just completely two different animals.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that in some ways, commercial is just developing as a recognized profit center in a dealership for mobility as it emerges. It reminds me a little bit of, you were talking about Pat Ryan, but back in the day, F&I wasn't recognized. It was not a formal part of the business. And now look what it contributes to the total. The commercial is going to come. You know, regarding that, one of the ways to measure your department's success is financially how it contributes within the store. And again, I'm curious for you, Dan and Rene, how do you break out? Do you have financial information every month, just like at retail, where your expenses and your revenue is separated, and you can identify your contribution to the store?
Yes,
you do. And is that something you do internally, or is that done is Ford help you with that?
Internally.
Yeah, it should be. How about Rene? How about from you guys?
This is a hot button for me, Jim, and I'm glad you asked. A long time ago, and I don't say too long ago, but someone asked me, what's the number one thing you can do in our industry to really get to the next level? And therein lies the issue right there, is we need to be able to measure what we're doing. So one of the things that we're working on here is internally, not only just manually. I can call any store right now and say, hey, how many did you sell and what are you grossing? And I'm getting their numbers, right? But it's deeper than that. We need to be able to measure not just sales and gross, but PRU, and what are we doing on sale, net to sales, and what are we doing on cost of sales, and how are those fleet and commercial customers, how much are they spending in the shop? And we are probably, I'm going to say, 6 months away from being able to roll that out. I've got part of that rolled out now, and I can tell you just the partial part rolling out, just the partial that we've right now. I can tell you how much you're grossing on every deal, what your sales are, and what your PRU is. Just that alone has got our fleet and commercial group here at our company a seat at the table, because now people are saying, yikes, you're contributing that much money to the financial. In the past, you never knew, because on the financials, the OEM financials, fleet and commercials roll into retail. So you really don't have a good way to measure it. And so that is a hot button. And if we get there and the OEMs are able to get us there, I think you'll see us take this thing to the next level.
Yeah, when we're bundling services along with our hardware, the contribution to the store may be more than retail, especially if you look at after sales. You see that?
Jim, I remember being at a Ken Taylor training class, and I was sitting there, and one of the commercial managers in the room was struggling with his store, and he said, I can't get my general manager and my dealer to 100% focus on fleet and commercial. He said, can you give me anything? And one of the things that started talking about was cost of sales. Ken Taylor was saying, you know how much money it costs for you to find and sell and close a retail customer versus a commercial customer who buys multiple or then even a fleet. The cost difference is just astounding. And so in my mind, I started thinking, we got to be able to measure that, because this is what dealer principals and then, like big groups like us, the executive team, that they want to see those numbers. If you can show them those numbers, you'll get that commitment, and you won't have to beg for it every day.
To add into that, and it was something, we were talking about earlier when you talk about bundled services. I don't know. My gut feeling is, because we don't do a ton of track leases yet, but I would have to speculate that when you start talking about track leases and those bundled services, that part of what would go into that would be maintenance service contracts. And so, one of the things that we're looking at is we've got customers that are coming into service that we've never sold before. So we're now starting to prospect to those customers. And I know it's an age-old thing, and there's probably a lot of people that are already doing it. But I think when you look at the opportunity that service is producing for you, not only in additional prospects, but also, back to your point, Jim, the revenue piece. When I look at, like Rene was talking about a net to gross, when you look at what fleet does compared to the retail divisions, it's not even close, at least in our store. Maybe it's different in other stores. But when you look at the gross improvement, the repair order count improvement, which again creates more opportunities to sell more vehicles out of service. We've measured forever, because my background in service, when you start talking about customer retention, why aren't we measuring customer retention within, the commercial sales to commercial service? There's nothing that's out there yet. And so I just think about the opportunity that service creates, and I think about the revenue. To me, and that's what I love. And we're very fortunate within our facility that commercial sales and commercial service are all in the same building.
And it's huge, a big investment you've made, a significant investment, much more than at retail for service.
For sure. And we're expanding.
Yeah. So one of the things that part of this that's of interest, and it sort of goes back to when we started talking about shifts and changes in customer behavior, is the customer's desire to do more business digitally or on an omni-channel instead of the old way of doing business. Retail, we see that. Are you seeing also at commercial that commercial customers are more interested in doing business on the internet? Not all of it, but at least being able to start the process or be part of the process with technology as opposed to physically coming in the way they used to? Or are commercial customers still more hands-on?
Jim, I think what drives that more is all of the rules and regulations, because of the wet signature problem. It's a bigger problem for us as on the retail side, because think about this. If you sell a customer 10 vehicles and you're laying out 10 sets of documents in front of that customer, think about how many signatures they have. Even with a power of attorney, depending on the state you live in, DOT may require a wet signature. So you can never fully get to a digital process, if you will, but we're sure looking at what can we do to minimize that pain, because I went on one delivery with somebody just a month ago, and I'm not kidding you, 25 vehicles. The entire conference room was filled with paper, and I said, who the hell is going to sign all that? That's amazing to me that we do that. But it's all about the wet signatures, and yes, they would love to go digitally. I mean, who wouldn't? But we've got to get the industry there, because there's some other issues that we have to fight through to get to that.
So fortunately, when Ford Credit went to, we could do everything digitally. We ran into an issue early with the state of Ohio and a wet signature. Unfortunately, that got changed. But I think the thing that, to me, the bigger thing that all ties to all of this is you've also got to think about, and I don't know, but when you look at the average age of a commercial account manager, and when I look at that average age, I'm right there. And sometimes that change is a challenge. And so I know when that happened with us, we had some guys that really struggled and pushed back. And, And I got to tell you now, I mean, there's nobody would want to go back to having paper or to have a wet signature.
Mhm. Interesting. Alicia, how do you overcome that with the teams that you're training?
You beat them over the head with a hammer, right? No, I'm kidding. It's just training. So earlier we were talking about opportunities and, how much did you sell? Both of these guys could tell you, how much did I sell? What was my gross on it? If I asked both of them, yeah, but what was your total opportunity? You don't know. What was your total opportunity? Oh, you sold 50? What was your total opportunities? We don't have a real good way to really track that because all of our traffic is either doing one thing. It's getting mixed in with retail and it's hard to pick out of there. I'm talking about out of our CRMs and out of our tools. And if there's a word that commercial don't like to talk about, it's CRM. It pains us, right? Because I don't want to use it because it's technology and it's hard and it's difficult. And I've never had to use this before and I've never had to do this before. And change is hard. But it's really the only way. How do you get better if you don't know where you are? How do you get better if you don't know where you are? How do you know how much you can sell if you don't know what your total opportunity is or your total missed opportunity? And the only way to get there is to get in and physically get your hands dirty, and to train and to be where the dealer is and to walk a day in their shoes and to sit with them and be like, yeah, that's not easy. This is not a simple task to do. Let's try to do things to make this simpler. And again, that's where OEMs can really step up and help and go, we understand that this is hard for you. Let's try to find a solution to it. But it's just constant training. And I'm not plugging what we do at all, but I mean, I meet with my stores weekly. We have weekly conversations because once a month is not going to do it. You just can't learn enough and retain enough.
Speaking of the CRMs, do you have commercial focused CRMs or do they work, or are you using a retail?
So Work Truck Solutions, of course, has theirs, and it's a good first step. I can tell you, all the retail CRMs are all very retail focused. It really takes a person who understands it, who's really good with CRM in general, a person who understands commercial and fleet business, and then somebody's got to have the time to marry those up together. Like I said, you really got to get in it and kind of create it because there isn't one that's customer or commercial friendly, at least not right out the box. And that's a problem, and it should be. I mean, well, it shouldn't be a problem, but it is a problem.
Dan, I saw you smile when I asked that question. Did you have a thought?
No, Alicia knows.
Yeah.
It is frustrating, because we've tried, so many times to put a square peg in a round hole and we struggled mightily with it. And so I would love to, there is one that we were looking at, but struggled with the initial investment because it was so exorbitant. So I don't know, but yes, we need a better solution.
Rene, have you come up with a solution?
Yeah, and that solution, I was going to say, whatever that solution is, because we have looked at that here. Because I echo what with Alicia and Dan said. I mean, it is very difficult to use a retail tool to try to make it fit into your commercial world. Just as, or like for instance, if your CRM allows you to quote and you're selling multiple at a time, you can't even do multiple quotes. You got to load them in one at a time. So, we put up with a lot on our fleet and commercial side, and it is difficulty. But I remember, and I don't want to age myself here, but I remember my first stint in fleet and commercial. There was a company out there called ACT, and they seemed to be the preeminent at that time CRM system. But yeah, nowadays, I mean, you got your Salesforces and you got your Elite and you got all of these companies, but until somebody really understands our industry, like Alicia said, you're struggling. And then to Dan's point, it's not just the technology, but when you have the not the youngest sales force, let me say it that way, on our side of the fence, it's also very difficult. I recently sent out an Excel. I'll just tell you a quick story. Sent out an Excel and said, hey guys, I need you to fill this in for me. Some of them couldn't even figure out how to put it on Excel. They were sending me emails. I got a list from one guy. It was 25 VINs. He said, I didn't know how to put them in your crazy file. Can you just put them in for me? He didn't even know. So guys, we take it for granted. Those of us that are technologies, at least somewhat savvy. I mean, I'm not the genius there, but it's a very difficult challenge. It is. We've got to do that, especially as our industry and our customers get younger and they will demand more technology. We've got to be, if you're going to give them the maximum customer experience, you're going to have to get there.
And as Alicia said, it's Work Trucks has the beginning elements, but we need to come up with a holistic solution for the future, not just today. Because if it's a problem today, just selling hardware the way we are, when we move into mobility, it's a significant opportunity that's going to be the basis of our ability to move and to grow. In that regard, without any secrets or any confidentialities, are there any things you're doing today to sort of plant the seeds for tomorrow? Are you training? Are you developing processes? Are you changing the organization? Or what are you doing now to kind of get yourself in a position to be ready? Or when the folks like me who can't understand how to give you the technology, and there's a retirement coming. How are we going to, for all of us, assure that what comes next is better? So are you, Dan, what are you doing to begin the process of preparing for the future?
I think so. I'm fortunate that I've got a handful of guys that are, under 30. And I love to hear them say that they're the cams of tomorrow. And those are the guys that are embracing the technology. And I think that, they know a lot, but they don't know enough yet, but they're sponges. And so I think the investment, we've talked about it for the last hour. I think right now there isn't enough training to be done. And there's one thing that, you can train the nuts and the bolts and to spec out a truck. And yes, that's obviously extremely important. We're the experts of that. But I think whether it's prospecting, whether it's follow up, and especially when we start talking about some of the new technologies that are coming from the manufacturers and making sure that everybody is fully up to speed, they understand how to use it, and they can truly be a commercial sale. They're not only they're a commercial account manager, but they're a consultant to create that trust and their long-term relationship with the customer.
That's what it takes, and we can preserve it with technology. We can't get ourselves in a position where you choose one or the other. You do both. Rene, how about your future changes that you're making and implementing?
We're constantly changing, but to specifically to your question, as much as we can remain legally compliant, we're trying to go younger on the sales force for fleet and commercial. We're also, interestingly enough, we're trying to bring more women into the industry as well, because, and I see Alicia nodding her head there in approval, but for a long time, if you look at the fleet and commercial side of the business, it all looks the same. So it's time to go younger. We think time to bring women in. And one of the things that we're trying to do, and we're early in this stage, but Dan just touched on it. We're trying to focus on that. We feel like, at least on the fleet side, it's two different businesses. We have the account executive side. Those are your hunters. We have the account managers. Those are the people who are going to manage the account. We're trying to mold into that right now and to say, okay, if we're going to truly be fleet management type people, you need really both account executives and account managers. So that's what changes we're putting in right now to try to keep pace with the industry and to try to give our customers a better experience.
Alicia, do you see any changes occurring in the stores that you're visiting, or
yeah, well, yeah, I kind of am the face of the change. If a store is, if I'm meeting, it's because they want it, right? They understand it and they want it, and they just need help implementing it. And it's really tough, but I get it. The way to go forward is to prepare. Stores got to have a plan on how to get folks excited to want to sell commercial, to want to sell fleet. You got to show them that it can be, successful, but then having the tools and the resources to help. I just came back from some training workshops, and the phrase that was thrown around was educate, don't terminate. Educate, don't terminate. Turnover sucks, man. You got to start all over with some people. Educate. Have you given this person all the tools and resources necessary in order for them to be successful? And if the answer to that is no, well, shame on you. But again, where do we get the tools? Where do we get the resources? Have I given them the training that they need in order to be successful in today's world and going forward? A lot of that is going to have to be getting comfortable with your technology. You just got to do it. You're not going to survive without it.
Well, it's interesting. It also kind of harkens back to the comments that we heard about the OEMs, and that is that you've got to lead the organization by doing the right thing first, and the OEMs need to invest in their people and developing them and training them. And it isn't just hiring somebody; it's bringing them in for a couple of years of training, cycling them through the departments. At Toyota, we used to have every associate started on the assembly line for 2 weeks to try to learn the business. I don't think they do that anymore, but from the ground up. And that's really what it takes. So we're sort of getting to the end of our session here. I wonder if, for the three of you, just take a minute or so, if you had a magic wand today, for right now, what would you ask for? What would be your request for something that would solve a problem or be a solution that you've been looking for? Rene, why don't we start with you? What's your magic wand?
I think that's a wide open question, but I think that the ideal thing I think if I was going to talk in terms of the OEM, I think the one thing that I think the big takeaway I have is that we're not all a cookie cutter approach type thing. Each store is unique. Some stores will do commercial, some will do fleet, some will do both. I mean, I guess to the OEM folks that might be listening, it's not a one size fits all. Try to learn your client and your dealerships and try to focus on what their needs are. As far as training goes, I couldn't agree with Alicia more in there. Training is very important. I think my favorite quote, and I'll close on this. My favorite quote when it comes to learning is the illiterate of the 21st century is not the person who can't read and write. It's the person who's unwilling to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that to me sums up everything about learning right there. So I'll end on that note. Thanks, Jim.
That's a great quote. That really is. Alicia, what's your magic wand? If you could ask.
Attention and support, I guess I would say. They need to pay attention. They need to pay attention to what it is that the stores really need in order to be successful. Stores, your general managers of your stores, you need to pay attention to your fleet and commercial or commercial department. Far too often I hear, I want the training, but the guy, the gal, the person that signs the check isn't bought into it or doesn't understand it, or we don't have the funds allocated for it, or whatever it is. So attention, we need to start paying attention and give the dealers the support that they're requesting.
Dan, how about your magic wand?
So to clarify, from the OEM or in general in the industry? Either one. I think from the OEM, I think exactly what Alicia just said. And I think from the industry is the CRM piece.
Yeah,
To have insight and to be able to know, we can't fix what we can't measure, and it's like we don't know what we don't know, and so often I feel like you just don't. I mean, you want to know everything that's going on with your business, and it's really hard to find, and it's easy. And I got a quote as well that I love, and it's get curious, not furious. And it's so easy to get mad about something until you start digging in and asking questions. And sometimes it's hard to when you don't know it, it's like, where do you find the information you're looking for?
That's great. This is a tremendous panel. We could go on all day long. Our audience is growing by leaps and bounds. They're gaining. I can't thank you enough for your time and sharing your wisdom so openly. And it also gives me a lot of confidence because you are running the store today. And I've got a lot of confidence now in what the future is going to be. Folks like you all, we've got a rosy future, and I'm happy to say that my pension will continue to be paid because of the hard work and efforts of everybody right there. I thank you all very much for your time, and I thank you, Work Truck Solutions, Aaron and Catherine, for the opportunity. I hope you'll see the value here. Maybe we could expand this next time because this is pure gold. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody.